Bitcoin and what that is all about. So, total Bitcoins on issue, 14, 15 million, actually probably a little bit more now, keeps on changing. And it's a really interesting technology. Bitcoin is significant because of the way in which it thought about and developed virtual currency. It was just simply different from anything that was done before and solved some critical problems. We don't know who did it. A guy called Satoshi Nakamoto. No one knows who that person is, which is all the more mysterious. But it was done. It was invented in a very short paper, and then a whole community actually implemented it, and we have the Bitcoin network went live in 2009 and has been going strong ever since. From an economics point of view, the idea actually came from this person, Narayana Kocherlakota, who was, until very recently, the chair of the Fed at Minnesota. Kocherlakota wrote a paper called Money is Memory, which envisaged money in a slightly different way than you might have already expected in the economics textbooks. In the economics textbooks, money is considered to have three features. It is a unit of account, a medium of exchange, and a store of value. And the reason those three things come up, because everything we regard as money usually has all three of those features. That's never been the greatest definition of the world, and economists have had real trouble in explaining what is and what isn't money, because there's a lot of things that satisfy this unit of account, medium of exchange, and store of value. And it's not always cash, it's not always coins, it can be other things as well. And so there's a real deeper issue regarding what can satisfy that. And so with regard to Bitcoin, those three characteristics tend to apply. People argue over whether it is a good store of value because it fluctuates a lot. But then again, there are lots of currencies out there that also fluctuate in their value with respect to the US dollar a lot. That doesn't mean they're not a currency. And whether it's a medium of exchange is actually a stronger thing. I'll come to that a little later. But money is memory organized the thinking about money in a different way. It basically said what the role of money is it is a register. You could consider it to be a register in a database. When I want to buy an apple, how does the apple seller know that I have the right to do that? So imagine we're just determining who gets what by who has the right to do so. The apple seller may want to sell me an apple based on other things that I gave to it. I might have an orange, and the apple seller wants an orange, and I want an apple, and we exchange them. So that's one way you can do rights. But what, of course, if my right is, oh no, I should be able to buy an apple because I did some work elsewhere. And then they gave me this receipt for the work called dollars, and I'm going to give you that now. That indicates that you now are the carrier of my reward for doing the work. And so you can imagine that one way to keep track of all that would be to have a big register of who did what, when, who, why, and whether it was all worth it. But Kocherlakota said, this is really what money is. Money is, taking the role of that register. By handing people money, we don't have to keep a record of what they did to get it. So long as we all agree that the money says that they did enough to get that money. And then you can just exchange it from that point of view, and you don't have to keep this database. Now, it's interesting because, of course, the database is the real thing, and money kind of substituted for the memory that would be of who did good and who did bad in the database. But it was a great idea. And so he did this paper in 1998. And that paper was influential, we believe, to Satoshi Nakamoto in thinking about a digital currency. In other words, what Bitcoin did was focus back on the database and said, how do we get the database to record these entries? Because we just need the entries in the database. And how do we agree on whether they're right and we agree to abide by it? So to understand the Bitcoin protocol, we'll take two agents. We've got Alice, who wants to deal with Bob. Okay, Alice can give Bob some dollars. Now let's not talk about dollars and things. Let's imagine we had a different currency and we called it InfoCoin. And so Alice could proclaim, I, Alice, am giving Bob one InfoCoin. And Alice could say, you know, I want to tell the world that I'm doing that. And so it sends a message to the entire world, and Alice signs it with a private cryptographic key that indicates to anybody who wants to check that Alice indeed sent the message. Now, of course, it's all very well. Oh, good. Isn't that good for you, Alice? Sending Bob one InfoCoin. The rest of the world is not going to sort of say, well, does Bob really have an InfoCoin now? Unless they know what? Did Alice have an InfoCoin in the first place? Because Alice could just send this message to Bob over and over again. And if Bob was sort of naive and say, oh, look at all this money. Yeah, sure, you can have all my apples. That would be crazy. No, we have to have a way at which Alice has a right to send that message. A right to send a message that says to everybody we should update this database on who has what in terms of InfoCoins. So the way, one other way to do that would be to identify all the InfoCoins out there and say there's all these InfoCoins and they've got serial numbers. And so Alice goes and says, I'm giving Bob one InfoCoin. It's not any old InfoCoin, it's a specific InfoCoin with the serial number arbitrarily 123456. Alice then sends the message to the entire world, signs it with the cryptographic key. So far, so good. So that stops Alice from giving, in order for Alice to give Bob, she can't send Bob another one with the serial number 123456 because Bob will say, hey, you can't have two of them. There's only one of those. So that's fine. So it stops Bob sort of being duped in that way. But wait a second. What's to stop her saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 7? Who makes these serial numbers in the first place? Someone has to mint them. Someone has to say these are the serial numbers to stop Alice just pulling some out of the air. So one way we do this in the real world is Alice sends a message to an entity like a bank that Alice signs with a private cryptographic key. In our case would be like a PIN number or a signature or something like that, but you know, in the digital world, cryptography could do the same thing. And then Bob goes to the bank and says, hey, I just got a message from Alice that she's going to give me this InfoCoin with a serial number. Can you just verify, does Alice own it? And that she hasn't already spent it and said she's giving it to someone else. Well, the bank says, well, let me check my records. Updates its records to say, yep, that's fine. And the bank, holding centrally this database, says, no, that's fine. And Bob says, good, on your say-so, we're good. Now, that's actually very close to the way we currently do things. Everything is determined by banks. Banks basically agree that you've got money to spend, and that's all you do. You know, occasionally you use cash, but for most people, it's all, you know, please bank, tell me what's good. And the banks actually take a little while to work this all out, but the system kind of resolves itself. But what happens in Bitcoin is they don't want any banks to be involved in this process. So what Alice does is send this message to what is called the blockchain. And the blockchain is this database, is really the database. Alice signs it the private cryptographic key, and then Bob checks their, you know, there's a database. It's just information. Everybody can have a copy. So Bob has a look and says, oh, look at that. I'm checking my version of the Bob coin. Alice owns the InfoCoin and she hasn't already spent it. I don't need the bank. I can just look at the database. Bob just says, look, that's fine by me. Tells the world, everybody, update your databases. Alice no longer has that Bitcoin. I've got the Bitcoin. We're all good. Ta-da. So Bob broadcast that. Now, there's a few issues now still here. Wait. How are we going to trust all this? So we're not done yet. So Alice could go in this situation to Charlie and say, you know, I want to give you this Bitcoin. This info coin with the same serial number at exactly the same time as Alice was communicating that to Bob, allowing Alice, so Bob and Charlie, they have a look at their respective things and say, oh, Alice has got it and they're giving it to me. Cool. They haven't spent it yet, not strictly speaking, because it's not in my ledger. Okay? So Alice can now, in this system, get the timing right and spend more than she has. Okay, so what is to stop Alice from double, triple, quadruple, whatever spending to game this system? So you notice what's happening here. We're layering on this message space, and how do we keep a database with integrity? And at each time, we're trying to think about what things might evil Alice do to get around it. And what stops now, we're down to this final thing. So everybody's got their own copy of the database, but what's to stop Alice gaming timing so that the, she fools a lot of people? Okay, all right. Well, the question is, how does everybody update their blockchain to know it's the right one? And that's where the real icing on the cake came in with Bitcoin. So if one gets updated before one another, that's no trouble. You might work it out and say, well, she spent her info coin with Bob, then she claimed to do it with Charlie, but Bob's one was done first, so Bob's got the right, and Charlie can go back to Alice and say, you're trying to screw me, and just wipe that transaction off and say it wasn't verified. Okay? It takes some time to do so. So if one gets updated before the other, there's no trouble, but it might take a little bit more time. What you need is actually more people than just Alice and Bob being involved in the verification of the Alice and Bob transaction. And so this is why Bitcoin is a network. Bob checks that Alice owns 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but then doesn't accept it and just says, look, I've got this message from Alice. And he broadcasts it to the community, and the community asks, do we all agree that Alice still owns that? Can I accept this thing? And if so, I'll broadcast and we can all update. Okay. Now, how do we get everybody to say they agree on this? Because remember, Alice might at the same time have tried to send something to Charlie. So there might be some disagreement. So there has to be a way of sort of resolving this. And, is it a consensus mechanism? Do we all vote on it? What do we do? Well, there are lots of ways one might have done it, but the way Bitcoin did it is effectively a system of voting. What can super evil Alice who wants to double spend do? So everybody's going to verify this. Alice is saying, I'm going to try and game this system, but then people are going to come back and say, I can't. What's a way to get around this? Alice can become the network. So that when Bob asks the network for their opinion, Alice can say, it's okay, it's fine, don't worry, it's all accepted. The problem is that we don't know who this network is. And what's to stop Alice becoming the network and duping a lot of people? And the solution they put in to Bitcoin for this was proof of work. Okay? The idea was to make it really costly to verify transactions, to stop Alice, but then give people a reward for this verification so that they don't pay the price of potential evil. And this is where Bitcoin mining worked in. In other words, in order to be legitimate and vote on the network and have your opinion heard, you have to actually do some work. Okay? And lots of people can be doing work, and anyone who's doing work can sort of compete for this prize. The prize gets a lot of people wanting it to come in to compete for it. Okay? And that allows there to be a diversity of opinions. And the way the prize works is they do basically throwing computational power at a complex cryptographic problem, which I'm not going to go into here. and become miners. Okay, that's what they call in Bitcoin. And these people build these big computers, data centers based on graphics processing chips, and manage to do that. Here's one example. And they do it because they can earn more Bitcoins. And if Bitcoin's more valuable, they'll do more of that, as it would come if it was being transacted a lot. So the system kind of works itself to keep Alice from gaming the whole system. Alice, in order to do this, would have to do all of the proof of work and do it better than everybody else. And that is extremely costly. It's not impossible. It's extremely costly to do. And thus far, no one has really ever got it. And even if they did, they would only be able to spoof the system for a short period of time, and Bitcoin would lose its value, and what would have been the whole point. But nonetheless, the system is kept in balance this way, and also keeps itself moving and issuing new Bitcoins through the same process. So basically, to verify a new block of transactions in the blockchain, you have to solve this mathematical puzzle. It's basically a very hard guessing game, so it's a lottery, but with cost. One of these solutions, pretty much random, will then be the one that gets the miner a prize. And so the more computing power you have, the more likely you are to win the prize. How much computing power? A lot. 0.2% of US electricity consumption at some measures. This is not the most environmentally friendly way of doing something that should just be a digital thing. Okay. So is Bitcoin currently a bubble? A lot of people think so, including some of my colleagues. Is it a real currency? Is it it goes up and it goes down, and it will. Currencies also have their sort of bubble type aspects, and suddenly when it was at $1,200, that seemed like too high. When it's back at $200, that seems probably just about right. Is Bitcoin really money? Well, it is a unit of account. It's a way of adding up how much everybody has. It is a medium of exchange to a degree, in that you can put US dollars into it and take British pounds out of it. So it works from that. Is it a store of value? Well, yes. So it's volatile, but it still stores value. You can have Bitcoins and they're worth something. I've got some Bitcoins. They appear to be worth something. They can be part of my wealth. Okay? So there are lots of things that satisfy that. Bitcoin isn't good as the Canadian dollar. Why? Because I can't go down to shops and buy in Bitcoin. Now, it's true, I can use Bitcoin to buy things, but the price is always fluctuating depending on the value of Bitcoin. It's not that the shopkeeper has said, no, I'm going to fix the price of these apples in that currency and you can bank on it. No, Bitcoin is sort of secondary to that. So it's not really quite there yet. Why is Bitcoin different? Well, it's new. It's private. So that is, it's not government sponsored. So you can't pay taxes with Bitcoin, which is one of the advantages that other currency has. It's, of course, peer-to-peer, so that the banks do not verify the transactions, the miners do, at an artificially costly rate. Why? As I said, to avoid forking, to avoid two different blockchains, and so everybody's got to agree on this blockchain, this database. It's public. The transaction record is public, so it's actually far from anonymous. Actually, compared to cash, Bitcoin is like, if you're in the NSA, you'd love all the criminals to do all their activities in Bitcoin, because if you can work out who someone is, you can see everything they've done and whoever they've dealt with, which is why all the sort of illicit drug dealing stuff that was initially being used, Bitcoin was being used for, sort of fell apart fairly quickly. Okay, the historical record is there, and it's going back all the way to 2009. Okay, what's really interesting is that Bitcoin and the blockchain, and there's some readings about this, may allow for more, may allow for programmable money, may allow for digital assets that can be verified without a central repository. These are really interesting things, and this is the stuff to watch. Will Bitcoin collapse? Well, if it's money, that's a nonsensical question. It'll just have its value go up and down. Money doesn't collapse necessarily. The cap on its value is supply. Basically, because people are mining Bitcoin, Bitcoin can't rise to too much value. Otherwise, people will come in and add more supply to it by mining more intensively. So that's a situation there. And the demand is also limiting. It really depends on its stability. And there are legitimate drivers of its demand, including saving on transactions fees for international transactions, if you can do that. But there are others, including a company, for instance, called Ripple, that has a different protocol, has something very similar to a blockchain, and allows people to introduce international remittances. And a few banks around the world are doing that, save on all the costs of that. My guess is that private currencies may actually do better when they have actually better monetary policy. At the moment, Bitcoin has no monetary policy. It can't move up and down and stabilize itself the way the Bank of Canada does with the Canadian dollar. So these current crypto countries sort of have this very hands-off approach, so they don't have monetary policy. I wonder if some other or entities such as Ripple might actually be able to do better there.